Good morning, friends. Thanks for joining me again today. It feels very appropriate that as we're about to begin exploring the book of Job over the next 2 weeks, of course, it's a rainy week this week. It somehow just feels very appropriate to a book that is very heavy and can feel dark at times. And I want to invite you guys into this today. I don't so much have like 2 or 3 big teaching points today, as much as I want to extend an invitation to you. I want you to consider what the Lord is inviting us into as we approach this book of Job. And so we're going to be in this book, like I said, for the next 2 weeks. And there's a lot that happens in the middle of the book. And it's a book that, we're not necessarily attracted to or drawn to because it's about a man struggling with losing almost every single thing in his life, really, except for his own life and his wife. But even his marriage seems to be in some tension. Even the 2 or 3 friends he has left, there seems to be some trouble there. And so this guy has really been struck massively. We see just in the opening pages of Job, he loses his children. They die in a great tragedy. He loses his wealth. And I don't want you to just think, oh, a rich guy has a little bit less money. No, he gets wiped out. He loses his provision. He loses his possessions. He loses everything he's built his life or spent his life building. It's gone. And then if that isn't enough, his health is under attack. And he's just in misery and agony as he's struggling. And so that calamity that befalls Job, man, it just happens right out of the gate in the book. Then if we fast forward to the very end of the book, we see redemption. We see some restoring, some healing, a beautiful picture of God redeeming his life. But the reality is, in the book of Job, both the calamity and the redemption, they're just the bookends of the story. They only cover, maybe 3-4 chapters of this 42 chapter book. The real message of Job lies in the middle, where he is living, struggling, wrestling. He's in mourning, he's questioning, he's having all this dialogue with his friends, and he's just struggling with what's happening in my life. And so that's the real message of Job, is the stuff that happens in the middle. And so, friends, I want to invite you, yes, to dig into this book and to explore some of the areas that Job is struggling through and his friends are challenging him on. And as we get towards the end of the book, the dialogue that he has directly with the Lord, I want to invite you to be willing to do some of your own wrestling during this. There's kind of one big question. There's a lot of questions through the book. Many people think of this book as why do bad things happen? That the book addresses that. Why do we suffer? Why does evil happen? And full disclosure, I don't think the book really addresses the why. It gives us a few glimpses, but the book is a lot more than that. And so one of the big questions of this book is, when important things get stripped away, how do I respond? What impact does that have on my life? And so I want to give you a couple of things to consider yourself, not just as you read the book of Job, but as we're living through this unique time that we're in right now. I don't know anybody directly that can relate to all the things that Job is going through, but many of us are experiencing the stripping away of things. We might identify financial things that have been stripped away, key things in our life that we rely upon day by day that are gone or have changed dramatically. It is a big stripping away. And so I want to give you some thoughts to consider. Number one, how do I respond? How do I respond when things get stripped away? Do I quickly just try to go back and put it all back together? Do I try to mask it and pretend like, oh, it's not that big a deal, nothing big has really happened here? Do I respond in anger, in fear and frustration? Do I retreat into a shell? How do I respond? Be willing to actually step back and consider your response in the midst of tragedy and calamity. And then I would encourage you to move into, what does it reveal? What does it reveal when important things get stripped away? one of the key things that we should recognize is that much of what we rely upon day in and day out, it's temporary. It's destined to change. It's like a breath. It's a wind. It's like the flower that grows and then fades. The scripture talks about all these things. Much of what we rely upon is destined to change. And so what does it reveal that is important in my life, that I rely upon, can be a big revealer. And then finally, and man, this is a key thing I want to encourage you with, is where will I turn? When things get stripped away, maybe I'm not sure how I'm going to respond. Maybe I'm not crazy about what it reveals about me. Maybe I'm not even ready to mine those waters yet. Well, then consider this. Where will I turn? And in Job's mourning and struggling, the one thing that he's willing to do is he's willing to get real and to lean in. I want to read this passage to you. In fact, the first half of this verse is a pretty famous verse. It's fairly well known to many of us. It's Job chapter 13, verse 15. And it opens, the first half of the verse says, "Though he slay me, I will hope in him." Or your translation says, "Yet will I trust him." Though he slay me, I will hope in him. Famous classic passage where Job is saying, hey, in the midst of all this trouble that's happening to me, I'm going to continue to hope or trust in God. But the verse doesn't stop there. The second half of the sentence says, "Yet I will argue my ways to his face." Job says, God, I trust you. All this stuff is being stripped away. I'm holding on to hope, but we're going to have it out. We're going to have some real talk. I gotta talk about this stuff. I've got to argue my case. I've got some questions to wrestle through. And friends, I want to encourage you that the book of Job invites us into that place of wrestling. It gives us permission to get real with God, to get real with each other, and to have the hard conversations. And the message of Job is that in the midst of the greatest tragedy, that if we are willing to lean in and to wrestle, it will be a huge revealer of our own hearts, but it will also shine a light of hope because it's also a great revealer about our God. I don't want to skip to the end of the story. I want to encourage you to hang in there and get there. But as Job begins to arrive at the end of this book, God gets put fully on display. And Job catches a glimpse of who he is at a level that he's never had before. Friends, these are some of the things that can come about in seasons where important things are being stripped away. And so I want to invite you into the unknown, into the uncertainty, into the place of wrestling. The truth is, our lives are much like Job's. There are glorious mountaintop moments. There's calamity. There is ultimate redemption through Jesus. But much of our lives get lived right here in the middle, in that place of wrestling, in that place of struggle. And I want to invite you, don't shut that down. Don't ignore it. Consider how you will respond. And let's hear God's invitation to come and not only find hope in Him, but wrestle with Him through the hard things. And I believe He will prove Himself faithful, as He has in the past through His saints, as He has in your life in the past and in mine, because He is the same yesterday, today, and forever. I love you, friends. I'm praying for you. Let's lean in and see what God might reveal to us. Hope y'all have a great week.